All right. I hope you had a good lunch, and I apologize that we have been a bit chaotic. There is activities there, there's activities here, and we are running quite late. But thank you all for coming. This is NCO's networking talk, and we have invited a lot of data custodians to the talk. And here, next slide. You've changed to 1:15. Okay, so some housekeeping matters. We'll be taking some photos and this will be recorded. You can leave your questions to the end. And we had planned for Andrew Morris, who's director of HDL UK, to give us a presentation. And from 2 to 3, we've also asked the Singapore Strategic Cohort Consortium that NCO has been supporting for about 2 years to give us a sense of what are they doing and what they're aiming to achieve at the end of 3 years. And so this will be the lineup for today's presentation, and I thank you for coming. And then I wanted to also say thanks to all of the cohort custodians who had given us time in the last year to speak with us about your strengths and challenges in running cohort studies. And when we spoke to you, we've also asked for your permission that the notes will be written up as a report with all of you contributing to the report. That will highlight the strength of having a cohort study, what is needed to keep it going, and what should we do to elevate the cohort studies after collection and to make it a lot usable. So these are everyone we have spoken to, and many of you are sitting in the room now. So this is to let you know that do expect some report to be circulated in the next half of the year. And then we welcome all of your feedbacks in terms of being a cohort advocate and how do we get everything fair. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Andrew, who's going to take us through a journey of data, which is what we have. You want to use this?
I'll just stand here.
Okay.
and research. And thirdly, it's how we perceive data. And I'm going to try and convince you that we should see data as core critical national infrastructure. And as you can see, Singapore is very good at building things, because we don't have buildings like that in London. And the opportunity here is to assemble a trustworthy health data research infrastructure for 6 million people. So that's the script. So pace of change. So we have challenges on this planet. You know, I'm an old guy. I was born in 1964 when there were about 3.6 billion people on the planet. As of November 22, United Nations says that's gone to 8 billion people. So how do we meet the needs of 8 billion citizens? The other thing that we notice, and these are UK data, are inequalities. And the fact that if you live in the most deprived areas of society, you not only have decreased lifespan, but you have decreased health span. So this was our Chief Medical Officer's report showing that if in the 10% most deprived areas, you live 26 years in poor health relative to 15 years in poor health. So how do we look at health span in terms of how we meet the needs of our population? And I thought in my own life, I've seen a lot of pace of change. So this was me. I shouldn't have been sitting on the bed, because you shouldn't sit on the bed, but this was me. You probably didn't recognize me, I know. This was in Glasgow. Anyone been to Glasgow? In 1987, very modern digital hospital here. But it was Bill Gates who said, most people overestimate what you can achieve in a year, but completely underestimate what you can achieve in 10 years. And we are seeing this in our own careers. So just to illustrate that, the Glasgow Coma Scale, we still use it. And I knew the guys who invented it, Jeanette and Teasdale. They were two neurosurgeons. But this was data science of the most primitive type, because you collected 3 scores, you added it up, and it actually predicted outcome after a head injury. And we still use it today. It's quite remarkable. What else? MRI didn't come along until 1984. Statins didn't come along until 1986. Laparoscopic surgery came along in 1990. So I say this is why you can never find a surgeon in a hospital, because they're all together. Smoking ban in public places. And can I commend Singapore for banning vaping? That is remarkable, a remarkable achievement, which I don't think we'd get through in the UK. Immunotherapy, as you know, is transforming cancer therapy. CRISPR studies, COVID-19 vaccine development. But I would argue we're in a new age of large language models. And this is the Dean of Stanford. I only show you this picture because he's got the nicest office of anyone that I know. But he says, why AI is medicine's biggest moment since antibiotics? And I truly think that's the case. Because what we're seeing is a fusion of biology, computational science, social science is so important in this world, physical and biomedical sciences. And we've seen it in our own world. So this is Piers Keane from Moorfields. We worked with Piers. He curated 1.4 million OCT scans, ran a foundation model over them, was able to predict incident Parkinson's disease 7 years before it presented clinically. Dubner and Charpentier, as you know, won the Nobel Prize for CRISPR. And then Sarah Teichmann and Hanifa, the Atlas of Cells, which is characterizing the 27 trillion cells that make up the human body. So it's this fusion that's also been recognized in the world of Nobel laureates. So here we are. Last year, physics and chemistry were both awarded for machine learning and neural networks. And we know Demis Hassabis from Google DeepMind, because he founded AlphaFold, which many of you heard of. So in the old days, we used crystallography to define protein structure. And it was about $1 million a protein to actually describe it. And before AlphaFold, we could describe about 200,000 proteins that made up human biology. We now have 230 million proteins. So it's remarkable. But that application of AI needed data. And the data it sat on, this is Janet Thornton, formerly head of EBI, was protein structures which were curated well in a scalable way. So other concerns that we have, we've got that aging population, we've got inequalities, but it's productivity. And I'm sure you don't have this challenge in Singapore, but in the UK, our productivity has fallen off a cliff. And our productivity in health services is a real challenge. And we can't just keep throwing good money after an old model. So what we need to do is innovate using data to look at effectiveness, efficiency, and quality at scale. So productivity is a challenge. But we're very fortunate that outside our world, new technologies, as you know, are accelerating at pace. So I'm a diabetes doctor, Per's a cancer doctor. In the world of healthcare, we've seen remarkable progress in our disciplines, and it's the same in computational science. So whether you're in sensors, robotics, natural language processing, speed recognition, we've not only seen major advances within the discipline, but we've seen a confluence of these technologies. And the opportunity for us in healthcare is to harness these technologies. For example, in 2021, there were 12 billion devices, Internet of Things devices. There'll be 30 billion by the year 2030. And here's an illustration from our own world. This is a picture of one of our very many recent prime ministers. You can see being shown around a supercomputer in the UK, and that can execute 1 billion computations per second. So we're in the world of agentic AI or AGI, because what we're recognizing is that AI can surpass humans at common tasks. And how we apply this to healthcare is going to be key. So again, in the UK, just to stress the stress that the healthcare system is undergoing in terms of our waiting lists, our social care system struggling, and actually our life expectancy is falling. So what we're thinking is, how do we harness data and digital to actually come up with solutions which will change people's lives? So that is a major focus. But we in this room are all interested in data, and I say that data are the feedstock of AI, because you can't do the glossy algorithm without sorting the data. So other pressures on the system. So this is something that we're seeing is consolidation of pharma sector. So the UK used to be very strong because we had big pharma in town, AZ and GSK, but recently we've seen pharmaceutical giants pull out of the UK because they see us as a less competitive market. Huge opportunity for Singapore here. What we have seen is what I call the hyperscalers. So those are the cloud providers and the chip makers are coming in. And the Prime Minister and Mr. Trump announced a £150 billion investment of these big tech companies. And as a community, and I'll touch on this later, in the public sector, we've got to think, how are we going to work with this talent in a trustworthy way that shares benefit? Because we can't ignore it. Another big movement is to think beyond health. So in the UK, we are assembling something called a national data library, which is looking at cross-sectoral data, whether it's social care data, environmental data, geospatial data, financial data, so that we can look at all the impacts and the inputs into healthcare. So the concept of cross-sectoral data linkage. But I talked earlier about health data being national critical infrastructure. And what we've recently seen, the government has woken up to this fact and has put £600 million aside for something called a health data research service, which is the equivalent of trust in Singapore for the UK. So how can we sort our data to enable research at scale? But as we do that, I would make a plea that we need human data rather than synthetic data. This was a paper in Nature last year. It was quite a complex mathematical paper, but it talks about AI models that collapse when they recursively are trained on synthetic data again and again, generation by generation. So it was quite mathematical in design, but I loved the editorial which showed it schematically. It showed that if you take favorite breeds of dog and train them on the dominant breed, you actually collapse the model. So-called AI returns gibberish when trained on generated data. So what we're beginning to see is the AI companies are not only focusing on data centers. I think Meta have just built a data center that could power the entirety of Portugal. Talent, but also on data. And a lot of those data actually are not in the public domain. They sit within the public, they sit within the public sector. So in health, there's an opportunity, there are risks, but what we need to do is sort the data at scale, because quality AI needs quality, well-curated data. And it's not only the quality of data, it's the importance of scale. So this is an old example. This is Rory Collins, who leads UK Biobank. So this is the relationship between blood pressure and mortality from the Framingham study, and you sort of get a relationship there. So that's 5,000 people. This is 50,000 people, and that's 500,000 people. So scale is going to become increasingly important. And that's why Joe Purr and I are privileged to work with Singapore, because I think you have the opportunity to think of running studies for the entirety of the Singaporean population. But to do that, there are other, and social science is so important. Ethics, the social contract, the law, and the importance of doing this in a trustworthy way. So one has a social contract with society to use data for the public benefit, especially when one is dealing with the commercial sector. So thinking through how we establish trustworthy ways of dealing with data. And I was very fortunate to be invited by The Economist to write a sort of leader on this with Effie Vienna, who's a global leader in ethics and trustworthiness, about how do we do this in a trustworthy way so that you encourage innovation, but there are checks in the system. So how we need to coordinate expertise internationally as we look at AI in healthcare, but have innovative governance that actually enables this, whether it's sandboxes or pre-testing approaches to regulation. And this approach to new business investment models are needed for how we deal with the commercial sector. When one is invited to write such an article, I didn't realize they send a sketch writer along to draw you. And I wasn't very happy. They gave me 3 chins, you see that? So I won't be writing another. So that's the backdrop. And I think many of these issues are very relevant to what we've observed in Singapore. But I just want to talk through how, and we're not there yet, but we're trying to address these issues in the UK. And I have the privilege of directing Health Data Research UK, which is a national institute for health data science. And our mission is to unite the UK's health data in all its multidimensional forms to enable discoveries that improve people's lives, and to run studies on 69 million people, because that's what we wanted to do. And our 20-year vision was for large-scale data and advanced analytics would transform care, public health, NHS productivity, clinical trials, and discovery science. And I must call out the funders who came together, and rather than having multiple subscale investments, they came together and said, let's do this for the UK. And Joe worked for the MRC on the left-hand side here, who made the first investment. And the key to this, it's about partnership. So the easiest thing we could have done is build a building. But we thought, no, let's try and create an ecosystem of the brightest minds across the UK. So we are based at Wellcome in London, but we are very lean, and we've brought together teams of people from multiple organizations across the UK. Because we are living through a complete transformation, whereas the old model was a relationship model, where if you knew a researcher and you were a data custodian, you'd have a very one-on-one relationship. But we're seeing the sector mature, and we will see a many-to-many trustworthy ecosystem relationship. So the people with the best ideas can access the data to solve really knotty issues. But to do that, you need to collaborate to compete. So these trustworthy data systems need data, but they need governance, policy, standards, technologies, the operational machinery that other industry sectors have sorted. So for example, I could send Yap saying 100 Singapore dollars in the next 5 minutes. I'm not going to, but that's because his bank and my bank in the UK all subscribe to the SWIFT messaging standard. Whereas in healthcare, we've got complete fragmentation and silos. So that's the thesis. But then when you map the landscape, it's pretty complex, but I'm sure Singapore looks just the same, and actually we should map Singapore. So how do we assemble a trustworthy data ecosystem? But I would argue, and that's why it's such a privilege to work with the National Cohorts Office, because if you do this well, you cover the 3 dimensions of diversity of data, detail, scale, and longitudinal data. Because a lot of AI is around prediction, so it's about exposure and outcome, classical epidemiology. And if we can scale this, whether it's in the UK and Singapore, it will yield immense value. So that's the thesis. Just to show you our approach, we have a triple aim. Firstly, sort the data. Secondly, don't build it and they will come, because you might build the wrong thing. We have the concept of driver projects, which actually do 2 things: answer really important societal questions, but also clean the pipes of the infrastructure. Then thirdly, shape the future of health data research, because this requires collaboration across institutions, arguably never seen before. And it's hard, because culturally we are trained to compete. So number 1, sorting the data or accelerating trustworthy data use. And I'm going to make the argument that we get very starry-eyed around the new, on the right-hand side, this isn't working too well, the glossy algorithm that analyzes the data. But to get there, you need to find it, access it, link it, curate it, anonymize it, and it's really complex. And what we see internationally is complete disinvestment on the left-hand side of that curve. But we need to celebrate data engineering at scale. And to illustrate that, most folk think this is what data science looks like. You know, data science, value. But actually, if you look at the detail, you don't need to read this, but around access, data curation, and analysis, it needs really skilled people to work together as a team to engineer that data to create that huge value. The other thing you need is a data strategy. And this is the work of Kathy Sudlow, a close colleague. And we have sort of buckets of data. So we have our National Health Service data. We have our higher resolutional regional data, whether that's molecular data, genetic data, imaging data, etc. We have non-health service data, so those are government data sets. We have research cohorts, plus research-generated data, for example, by NUS, NTU, A*STAR. We've got a world of environmental spatial data, and we've got personal monitoring data. And the data engineering has to be different for each, but there is a common model. Because what we're trying to do is to connect researchers and innovators with data custodians and do that in a replicable, scalable, reliable, interoperable, sustainable way. This set of services that actually enables that to happen. And research funders classically have not funded this at all because it's seen as infrastructure, and infrastructure is hard to fund. In terms of our case studies, so this is just a quick, this is John Dinesh and Sarah Lewington. So they're linking 14 multi-omic cohorts and linking it to electronic health records to look at polygenic risk scores at scale. Immunity and inflammation. So we have we're accruing a nationwide respiratory data set. Similarly with medicines. So we're putting together a data set of 69 million people of medicines and devices. These core data assets which will really power research. I'll skip that one. So how's it going? So this isn't Scotland. This is, I put this in for YY because he's a big climber. But I think I don't think even he's climbed Everest yet. Is that right? Probably has. So we're in the foothills of where we need to be. But in terms of, we've been on the road about 7 years, and each year there's a sort of stock take of productivity. So it has a sort of flywheel effect. So about 5,000 publications, 300,000 citations, influences on policy. So these are the headline news. So these are just a few examples of publications which can be driven through this system by the HDR UK community. And big studies on 58 million people. 552 open source tools which are open to everyone, and we really are very proud of our partnership with colleagues in Singapore, because we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. We should be shamelessly using what we both create through a spirit of open partnership. I'll touch upon this later. Making data fair so people can find the data. We've had 303 influences on policy, so we actually support the government with their agenda. And we've trained 30,000 people through a sort of shared platform. Again, something that we should be doing collaboratively internationally. And we've also looked at special groups. We have a Black internship program, which supports career development in data science for people from the Black community. And we've leveraged about £100 million of funding, plus another 200 indirect. So it's this sense of products and services to make research easier. And just to canter through one or two examples of this, principles are important because there's a risk you have this so-called vendor lock-in, which is you do a deal and you find you lose the flexibility. So developing in the open with open APIs, which is how computers talk to each other, and so they're software systems that means that solutions can be tractable across other systems. Open source, open development, but assemble rather than build, so that you assemble an infrastructure. It is like that building I showed on the second slide. You assemble it so that it has a reliable set of products and services. And our three main products are a gateway, which I'll talk upon, Safe People Registry, so we know who's accessing data for what purpose, plus the ability to federate analyses across countries at scale. To do that, you need standards, so very, very boring stuff, but really essential. Data use register, data access register, data access agreement. You know, otherwise, it takes years for organizations to agree to share data. Data contributor agreement and clarity around the law. So the gateway's up and running. It's got about 34,000 users. We iterate it in terms of its design. I won't go, I've got a video, but for sakes of time, I won't do that. It allows people to discover data, and we are iterating its functionality so people can actually access data from a single portal for the UK. It's work in progress, but it has about 1,000 data sets from across 100 data custodians to provide a single shop window for UK data. Also has more sophisticated functionality, because researchers often say, I wonder where I could answer this question, so-called cohort discovery. So here's an example. How many people in the data set have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's and are aged over the age of 65? It sends a query to all those 1,000 data sets and brings forward the results so that you know feasibility of analyses. And we've put that across some big data sets, for example, CPRD, you've probably heard of, 49 million patients, and the entirety of the Scottish data set, about 1 billion records. And what we want to do is make this available and access to the data available to trustworthy researchers internationally, because we won't have all the best ideas. Data use registry I talked about. Safe People registry is a way of ensuring that who is accessing the data is a trustworthy individual. It's one of the 5 safes. And I'll skip that for time. But of course, this is all the engine room. We've got to think, what can you do with such data? So just to give you a little flavor of the types of outputs. So here's a study of 331 rare diseases in 58 million individuals. So an example of scale. Linkage of health data with educational data to look at the impact of APGAR score, which is a measure of fetal well-being. I'm on dangerous ground here, Nina. This is your world. And educational outcome and personal monitoring data. So it's a sort of scalable model. And we saw that in the pandemic because we're able to link vaccination data with antigen status data, with comorbidity, with hospitalization and mortality. So in the pandemic, we were very fortunate to be able to look at vaccine effectiveness, the impact of variants. So the UK avoided a lockdown associated with Omicron because of these data. We demonstrate, well, everyone knew that in terms of its infectiousness, it was through the roof, but in terms of its morbidity, it was a much less severe variant. So we were able to keep the UK open. Vaccine waning, vulnerable groups, etc. And what we were able to do for the first time ever was run the first ever study over 67 million people. And we published this in The Lancet last year, by linking analyses across these 4 trusted research environments. And again, it was a vaccination, vaccine uptake COVID outcomes study. But the key to this wasn't really the research question, it was the proof of principle we can run UK-wide studies. And we're taking the same model to other domains, for example, medicines. And I think this is a great target for Singapore. Can you have a nationwide approach to safety, effectiveness, and value of medicines, how they're used at scale? To link outcomes of medicines use to outcomes is just so powerful and important. So similarly, through the British Heart Foundation work, we've made this data set available. During the pandemic, we were able to look at incident disease across a whole range of cardiovascular outcomes, and estimated the unmet need, about 500,000 people who actually fell through the cracks of cardiovascular prevention. And we're also able to look at medicines safety. So this is an example, sorry, it's not a very good graph, looking at anti-seizure medications for the entirety of England, looking at valproate, which, as you know, is a high risk for neural tube defect, and then being able to plot it at the locality level to actually target individuals who are on valproate to offer them alternative medication. Unstructured data, I flag imaging. So likewise, we have the Scottish medical imaging from routine care. So this is 57 million radiology records mapped to outcomes. And we're currently putting a foundation model across this data set to predict incident dementia. And I'll just very briefly finish on dementia and talk about trials. Because a question I would have is, in Singapore, could we harness our existing cohorts and data assets and really power innovation in clinical trials? And this is something that we're doing in partnership with the Medical Research Council and the UK Dementia Research Institute, again with a UK-wide team, because, as you know, dementia and disease modification in dementia has been really challenging, but with lecanemab and aducanumab, there are signs of hope, and actually there are 168 drugs coming down the pipeline. But recruitment into trials for phase 3 in dementia is really hard. So we ran an experiment to say, could we use existing data to select individuals from the population sitting in cohorts, invite them for pre-screening, for recontact, and actually run a biomarker toolbox of digital cognition and blood-based biomarkers dementia to create a trial-ready cohort for neurodegeneration. So this ability to pre-screen eligible participants for clinical trials at scale using state-of-the-art technology, because you can now measure something called p-tau217 plus NFL in a finger spot blood, which actually is predictive of future dementia development. So this is something that we've done, discovering potential trial participants, recruit at scale, and enrich their phenotype through biomarker measurement. And this is a way of enhancing the value of existing cohorts, because in the REACT study, we've got 2.6 million people, Generation Scotland share. So in this basket of cohorts, we've got about 4 million people. And it's providing a service on top of those cohorts to actually enable trials. And again, this is a public-private partnership, delivered in partnership, data never moves, ownership and governance is federated, but there's a common fabric, a set of services, with the aim of making the UK very competitive in phase 3 dementia trials by accruing a 10,000 pre-screen cohort. Very attractive, and actually, as we know, participating in a clinical trial, whether you're on placebo or the active therapy, often is associated with better clinical outcome at scale. But again, it's an example of harnessing existing data to provide value. And this is public and private, so we partner with Innovi and Cognitron, 2 companies to run the services. REACT is our pioneer cohort run out of Imperial College, and providing a new fabric of services across existing data assets. And finally, another example of a public-private partnership. This is with GSK. I'm sure you've seen the intriguing hypothesis that the Shingrix vaccine is associated with reduced dementia risk. So we're partnering with GSK to use existing data sets in a so-called quasi-experimental design because of the nature of the rollout of the vaccine in the population, to ask the question, does the Shingrix vaccine actually prevent dementia, incident dementia at scale? So this is a major multi-million-pound public-private partnership, but we see this as a way of positioning data to enable real-world evidence at scale across the entirety of the UK. So to finish, I should say that this, of course, is a global endeavor, and that's why I think Per, Joe, and I love coming to Singapore. But it was also a great privilege to welcome Cho Chuan, you'll see in the bottom left corner here, with your Deputy Prime Minister, to the UK, because we work in partnership. Because a lot of this pre-competitive engineering is pre-competitive. And if we can drive development in the open of data curation, data governance, data standards, then we will accelerate this global endeavor. So we work very closely with colleagues in Singapore, Australia, Taiwan, Canada. We work very closely with the Global Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative, as well as colleagues in the European health data space. And we sort of cut our teeth in the pandemic when we worked with the Gates Foundation to look at data sharing across 60 countries using these FAIR principles. And this was very productive in terms of academic productivity. We published this in The Lancet, and there are many examples of this about if you can sort the data at scale and then run federated analyses across countries, you can answer questions that no individual investigator or country can answer themselves. So, to finish, some key messages. I say success is a journey, not a destination. Firstly, earning trust, this open approach. So open standards, open source, open standards. This is pre-competitive, is really important. Public and patient engagement, international interoperability, and this approach to developing new public-private partnerships. The challenges ahead, I think, are maintaining public and patient trust as AI algorithms come of age. Secondly, just keep going and make progress, because we are in a very uncertain world at the moment. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This is about collaboration at scale, but let's focus the lens on the patients and the public, because that's why we're here. So to conclude, Marie Curie said, one never notices what has been done, one can only see what remains to be done. And it's the same for the National Cohorts Office, because you're making terrific progress, but you always think, what's next? But the final thought is Thomas Dorber, who was the founder of Framingham, the original cohort study. He said, participants were treated like gold. They must never wait, must be thanked by everyone they interact with. That participant must appreciate by the time that the person leaves, they're doing us a favor, not the other way around. Because we're the privileged users of people's data. So a call to action for Singapore is the need to harness data to close the gap between science and health services has never been greater, and the health and economic benefits of doing so never more inviting. We will never have such an exciting time, certainly in my career, to fuse computation with physical, social, mathematical sciences, and healthcare. Now, we all know that Donald Trump was in Kuala Lumpur yesterday, wasn't he? Well, actually, the real East-West summit was on the golf course. And I'm pleased to say we played Europe versus Asia. And it was a resounding victory for, this is the only thing that we're competitive about. But poor Ki Seng didn't play very well. So, but can we thank him, because he and you are the most perfect hosts, and I'll finish there. Thank you.
Are there any questions that you would like to ask Andrew or Joe or Paul, you know, the golfers? If not about golf, but you know, about data and cohorts in general.
How many similar initiatives have you seen around the world?
They're emergent. I think so. Australia's beginning to get going. Canada's advanced, and we do look to the Scandinavians for inspiration, because I think there's really fantastic practice. Perhaps not at the national level, where we talked about FinGen, for example. So that's an example of bringing cohorts together. But this has greater scale. So I think there is, you know, we're beginning to see what I call sovereign data capabilities emerging. And the European health data space will actually enable these types of activities. So in France, there's the French National Data Hub. In Germany, they've invested, I think it's about 80 million euros a year to federate their university medical centers. So we're not there yet, and this is full of problems and challenges and people issues. Some of the biggest challenges are organizations trusting each other to work together. And then secondly, organizations having completely different approaches to legals, contracts, data access agreements. And actually, we owe it to the use of the public pound to make that as efficient as possible. But it's the, you know, someone said it's the boring stuff, but actually it's the stuff that slows research down. So we should focus on it. And Nina's got tales as well of, you know, trying to work sometimes with these national bodies is impossible. But I have a phrase, smiling perseverance. So
Okay, if not, oh,
So
one
I'd like
point.
to ask if the work is invariably best led by academics in university, or should they be driven by funders in the ministry, or okay, you're smiling, you know what I'm trying to ask.
So no, it's interesting. So first of all, it's a team. So so, for example, I'm very privileged to work with people. For example, Cassie was the legal counsel for Amazon, so a really smart lawyer. Neil, who runs the technology stack, he ran cloud services for IBM in Europe. So we're recruiting these people into academia. So they're not classical academics. So that's number one. Who sponsors this is interesting. So that £600 million investment, the government is going to set up a gov.co because they want it to be of government. Whereas I think something that's at the far hand of government is arguably a better place to run this. So we're a legal entity and we're a charity. But there's often, you know, different models. A lot of it is based on control.
So yes, I'm glad you mentioned that line, that the university is recruiting them as as academics or join the university, because you know, if they are able to employ people with special skills who are not fitting the usual this definition of the academics with published papers as track record, then it's very hard to get them to come on board to do this, which is why I'm curious, again, who leads and then who funds the leaders? Because they are not your normal academics that you expect in university, or what the university looks for.
So you're right. And that there's a need for universities to recognize the career track of the engineers, the data wranglers, the legal people. Because at the moment, there's no career track, because they don't have their nature papers. But actually, this is like the Hubble telescope or CERN, that it will enable research which is unimaginable. And we need to value. So I'm really keen to support the career path of these engineers who assemble and run infrastructures. The other thing is academics classically aren't very good at running things.
All right, can we thank Andrew again for his talk? Thanks, Andrew. Okay. So you've just heard from Andrew, and now we're inviting Singapore Strategic Cohort Consortium, which is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6 pictures on the left, John, Roger, who's, are you escaping? Oh no. Wen Pui, and Rachel, Cheng Yu, they're all sitting in front. So we've asked John and the team to give us a prelude to what they've been building in the last 2 years, which is very much in line with what Andrew has told us, how to make the data open and how to connect all the data sets. And we've also invited all of you here as the 2025 RFP applicants from our NCO, and anybody who we've talked to in the past 2 years to sort of look at what we are trying to do in the general as an ecosystem, and supported by a lot of the SAB members and steering com members. So John's you're gonna speak, or? Okay.
I'll just do the initial intro and then I'll hand it.
Okay. And so John's going to start off, and then everybody else is going to come on and show us what they've been working on in the last 2 years.
Yeah. Thanks, Shailing. So I'm John Chambers. I work at LKC Medicine and at Precise, and I'm the PI for the SG100 case study, but also the sort of coordinating investigator for this consortium that we call Singapore Strategic Cohorts Consortium, SSCC for short. So what is SSCC? SSCC is a partnership, it's a collaboration between 5 population-based Singapore cohorts. The Singapore Chinese Health Study, helmed by Ko Wen Pui, the SEED Study, helmed by Cheng Yu, SG100K, helmed by myself, Singapore Longitudinal Agent Study, and the Yishun Study, helmed by Roger Ho and Rachel from NUS and Yishun, respectively. Now, we were applicants to the first round of the NCO call back in 2023 and funded under that scheme with a vision of coming together. We had 5 separate pots of data, each of which is individually valuable, but potentially even more valuable if brought together. So that together we can mobilize data and samples on 160,000 people rather than mobilizing data and samples on smaller fractions of those. In our funding scheme, we applied to do 4 programs, 4 packages of work. Work package 1 was predominantly coordination of activity, setting up the IRB framework, setting up the governance framework, setting up the research collaboration agreements, and that is coordinated by ELING. Work package 2 was about understanding the data pots within each cohort, what the variables were, how they're coded, and then harmonising that coding and so that the data could be brought together into a single, in inverted commas, data set. And then in turn, taking that data set and creating onward links to other government data sets, such as the electronic medical records. And that is held by Teresa Mina. Work package 3 is about building a trusted research environment, a safe data environment, in which approved underneath the governance processes set up in Work Package 1, under which approved researchers can come to use the data. It's not the only route to the data. We hope that trust will be a route to the data, but it's helpful to have a secondary data site that doesn't include the EHR data, that can be more agile and enable quicker and simpler approaches to data access. So WP3, setting up a trusted research environment, and that's helmed by Max Lam. The fourth pot of activity is to do some demonstration research. I'm not going to call it fundamental research, I'm going to say it's demonstration. And the ambition was to show that by bringing our cohorts together, we could achieve more than if we worked independently from each other. And there are two components to that. The first component is extending the molecular phenotyping and running some genetic association studies to show that we deliver more by greater sample size. And the second component is somewhat more advanced and includes taking some of our unique data blobs, in particular our image data sets, and showing how those can be used for joint research by a consortium. And that research package is led primarily by Cheng-Ching Yu on the image analysis side, but also by Terry Tong and Raj Doraju on the cohort enhancement side. Now, in the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to take you through some of those packages of work. You'll be reassured to know we can talk endlessly about coordination and IRBs and research collaboration agreements, but we're not going to talk about those today. But if anybody wants to find out how we approach data governance, research collaboration agreements, or IRB frameworks in the context of a national multi-institutional collaboration, we're take that offline with us. We're very happy to share our knowledge. What we're going to focus on for the next 45 minutes is 4 packages. The data harmonization, Teresa Mina will speak for 10 minutes, no more. Data platform, Max Lam will speak for 10 minutes, no more. And then biological enhancements and image-driven research, 5 minutes and 5 minutes, 5 minutes from Raj and 5 minutes from Cheng-Ching Yu. And then we'll stand up and take any questions about future directions in our closing remarks. So with that, I'll hand over to Teresa. You're up.
Thank you, John. Right. Oh, yeah, okay. Right, I'll stand here just so that everyone can see me. A great honor to be here, dear colleagues. I am speaking on behalf of the Data Harmonization Work Package. Again, I would like to start by just thanking all my colleagues in the room. This work is virtually impossible without the close collaborations with my colleagues. Again, just to give you a quick overview of how we bring together the data, we need to receive all the cohort-specific data set, and we need to perform a QC and QC and a QC again at the cohort, individual cohort levels, and then after that, when we merge them together successfully, repeat that process again, and then troubleshoot if we encounter anything in very close collaboration with each cohort analyst that represents the cohorts. And this is because the cohort analysts will have the best knowledge of their cohort data, which I don't necessarily maybe have the answer to. And then eventually, once we bring this together, we hope to establish data release to the community as well as linkage to electronic healthcare records. And so far, we have had all the data analysts nominated. We have established a very simple way, sharing through a secure site, exchange documents, understanding each cohort's data dictionary, appreciating the details, study protocol, and also sample data. And I say sample data because at this point, we are still finalizing the research collaboration agreement, so we have to continue our work, but while trying to understand the underlying data architecture. And then, so in order to drive this work, we need to understand the data structure, and the SSCC very much leverage on the SG100K experience. So we will adopt the data structure of the precise SG100K study, a multi-domain type approach, where we have one file that's called a core file. It contains the variables or parameters that you would typically expect in order to run your conventional epidemiological analysis, but also a more domain-specific files, which are perhaps device-generated or slightly more complex. So this table on the right gives you a quick overview of what we have done using primarily sample data. We need to check, of course, what asset we have. And so we go through different modules or domain, even within the core data. And also just a quick sharing that although at this point you observe that some are not available, but moving forward with the available biological samples, we will be able to enhance the availability of the data. And so this is a rather complex diagram, but essentially it's just to illustrate the missingness. The key message of this slide is to demonstrate to you that although we do not yet have a full access to the data, we are able to bring the data together, at least at this, using just sample data. Of course, at this stage, there are variables as represented by the rows that are available across cohorts. And then there are variables that are not available, only partially available. But that's okay, and this will improve over time. So aside from a very extensive work looking at the availability of the so-called core variables, we also evaluate the availability of other data domains, such as ophthalmology, or, for example, even health and lifestyle questionnaires, which also is very multidisciplinary. It contains perhaps validated questionnaire as well as other type of health history survey. And with this different domain, there are different difficulty levels in harmonizing the data. It could be from very simple variables such as gender, male, female, but it could be as complex as health and lifestyle questionnaire data. When was the last time the doctor tell you that you have high blood pressure? It's not necessarily identical with, do you have blood pressure in the last 12 months? So we need to look into these nuances, look at the options of the questionnaire in order to bring together and harmonize the data. Some of the work are completed, some remains the work in progress. And so these are what we have in terms of the pipeline. Understand that this is very much a work in progress, but we look forward to the confirmation of the RCA so that we can kickstart the actual data harmonization. But in the meantime, we have drafted our data dictionary. It's important to acknowledge the different availability in the each individual variable levels, and also to establish a timeline on where we want to go moving forward. In data dictionary or in releasing data is very much a phased approach. Everything's not going to be perfect at first instance, but we will work towards better completion, better, more organized data to enable research by the community partners. And so So I have discussed very quickly about bringing in together data across different cohorts and then working towards a harmonized data dictionary. But that is not going to be the end of the story, because if we were to enable work that extends beyond SSCC, such as collaborating with international cohorts, we need to speak in a common language, as Prof. Andrew Morris has established earlier. So one of the so-called global or common language is what we call as an OMOP, or Observational Medical Outcome Partnership, very much motivated by bringing in data from different healthcare cluster or different geographical region in a very secure way. So these are just a very quick illustration of what we want to achieve using OMOP, which is to establish common data model, enable federated learning or analysis, applying your ML model, and check the validation in another cohort, etc. So again, a quick overview of how do we even establish OMOP at the first place is that first we need to look at the data dictionary, in this case SSCC dictionary. We need to work out on asset that we have, and then we need to look at the nature of variables, establish the metadata, establish a list of OMOP mapping, and then we need to so-called register these OMOP vocabularies, map it and link it with whatever vocabularies that perhaps have been established in the Odyssey or in the Athena database that is publicly available. And so that's the bit of a hard work. And once this is registered, we can establish common data model and do the exciting research afterwards. So as of now, for SSCC and Helios SG100 case study, as one of the components of SSCC has successfully registered 579 variables that you can Google in the Athena database. And so this is what we have established, and moving forward, the number will continue to increase. It's not the end of the journey, and there will be more and more parameters. But just to say that it's very much a work in progress. And if there's any questions, I think our team is also learning along the way and happy to share knowledge, as John has earlier mentioned. This one, oh, yeah, sure, okay. And I just very quickly before handing over to the next speaker, this is also work that we are currently doing. We have so far talked about phenotype or data variable asset checking in a kind of flat data sense, but there are different kind of data. For example, imaging data are high dimensional and certainly needs a kind of different treatment compared to a big Excel spreadsheet, for example. So when it comes to image, it is very important that we anonymize the image because it may contain date of birth or all kind of other potential identifiers. And so prior to further sharing with the community, the anonymization work is important. And here my colleague, Dr. Akash Bahai, who is a bioinformatician, is helping us to look into this anonymization process. And I thought this illustration perhaps best explain what we are trying to do. So for example, in the metadata, you may have timestamp, date of birth of when the images were taken. This perhaps needs to be partially covered so that we can prevent the re-identification of an individual. Similarly, for the images, what the researchers would find useful is for example, the whole body DEXA image, the actual scan, and not really when they were born, etc. So in a way, we are working to establish an automated pipeline to do this in a large scale, in a way, anonymizing by, if you can call, cropping the image, but in a, of course, much more sophisticated way. So with that, I hand over to Max.
All right. Thanks, Theresia. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the data platform that we are in the process of setting up. And so this is the SSCC data platform, which is a trusted research environment. What's a trusted research environment? It's a secure place where researchers go to the data rather than moving the data out. So we're delivering it in two steps. One, a production-ready kind of setup, and then we'll go live. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So for this slide, I'll kind of talk a little bit more about the trusted research environment, right? So a trusted research environment is a secure place to analyze sensitive cohort data. Now, the rule is simple. The data stays inside the environment, researchers work inside the environment, right? And we're starting onboarding the SG100K data sets, and the same pattern would then apply to the other cohorts. Now, the question is, why do we need a trusted research environment? Because sensitive data could not be copied, emailed, but researchers still need powerful infrastructure and tools to analyze data at scale. So the TRE brings people and tools to the data with controls and a full audit trail. So we enable high-value analysis without compromising governance. And how does it operate? Think of it as a secure reading room you log into with a secure desktop or virtual desktop, use an approved tool set, and everything is recorded. If you need to take the results out, they go through a controlled output check, and under the hood, every workspace ties back to a central data management platform where we follow the proper governance. So in short, the TRE let us use data sooner, share the data safely, and scale consistently. So our SSCC Trusted Research Environment is underpinned by BC platforms. And the reason for that, why BC platforms, because we have set up some selection criteria. We extended these criteria unchanged to the SSCC TRE. The consideration is the same. So we want to make sure that the environment has a production stability at scale. We have central management for data teams, security that we can implement. The BC platforms also fits our AWS architecture with straightforward path for example, firewall, load balancers, endpoint protection, logging, monitoring, so on and so forth. Okay. So the question is, what do we actually get when the TRE is ready? So first, a secure cloud environment where sensitive cohort data are analyzed inside the platform, governed, log, auditable. Second, scalable compute that comfortably handles large whole genome sequencing multi-omics workload. Third, integrated bioinformatic pipelines and approved toolkits so teams can start quickly with reproducible setups rather than building their pipelines from scratch. At readiness, internal teams will have secure sign-in and project spaces using initially the SG100K datasets, but when other cohorts are ready, the data will be onboarded and approved users can use it. So at go live, we'll extend the same kind of experience to approved external users. So that will go through data access committees, and once approved, users can be onboarded to use the data. So here, it's a lot of details, but I just want to say that we are already in the process of onboarding the SG100K data. So this will include the clinical, genomic, methylation, metabolomic data. So when the production environment is ready, from day one, analysts will be able to use it. And of course, at go live, approved users will be able to kind of access and analyze the data. So very quickly here, under the hood, the SSCC platform runs on managed Kubernetes platform. So what that means is that it's all packaged in containers so that researchers get consistent, reproducible workspace without wrestling a lot with the dependencies to set up that environment. This setup also allows us to scale elastically and also to keep the environment and the stack portable. So the same pattern can be run across clouds if needed, and basically is integrated on AWS. So that's actually scalable and portable for us. Now for the users, this might be more interesting. So this is from the user perspective. The BC Insight, we have two clean kind of implementation, the data management tool for system administrators and data managers to register data sets, onboard data, manage metadata, set project permissions, so on and so forth. And then for the bioinformaticians and the researchers, where they could actually work, log into a secure desktop, open the approved tool sets, run the analysis, and then require for airlock access to download summary statistics and summary data. Here we have the BC Insight offering. And here we have a few kind of capabilities showcase. You'll be able to kind of do cohort building, run pre-configured and customized analysis, including next flow analysis. So standardized tools that you can just run out of the box quickly once you have access to the environment. And of course, a collaborative research environment where your teams can access into the same environment space, share your notebooks, share your scripts, very similar to Git if you are familiar with using Git. The other one, BCR Quest, that is basically a no-code kind of environment where researchers can start cohort building, right? Looking into the data, even without individual level data access, you can look at the summary statistics. You can dynamically build cohorts on the fly, just point and click. And this also allows for federated analysis where data from different cohorts can kind of be brought together and queried at the same time. We have, alongside BC platforms, developed the billing module. So when you get onboarded onto the platform, the billing module will allow a very transparent way of charge to institutions and teams who are using the SSCC environment. So this is a very efficient way of handling billing and transparent way of handling billing. So again, if you are interested with this, you can come talk to us. We'll explain a little bit more how this thing works back end. I'm going to skip this very quickly. This is just showing that there are multiple dependencies, both technical and institutional rules, and how we have set up the SSCC TRE setup is being able to kind of meet institutional rules, while at the same time making sure that we drive the production and setup of the SSCC TRE in a timely manner. Okay. A lot of details here, but I wanted to kind of just focus on the bottom where we are saying that the environment is almost done. We are working very closely with our engineering partners, Oleon and BC Platforms, and we are in the last steps before opening to collaborators mid-February next year. Okay, and this is my last slide. Just powering through quickly. So those who have, some of us might have joined the PRECISE workshops in the course of the last one and a half years. So you would see me and some of our colleagues. So we are architecting the SSCC TRE complementarily to the PRECISE TRE. You will know that for PRECISE, you have access to the PRECISE data through trust. SSCC, you have also access to the data, as John pointed out earlier. The SSCC TRE is a way to access the research phenotype data and the whole genome sequence data if users may not need EHR integration. So how we're going to do this, instead of copying data across multiple environments, we are going to link the environments up through a secure VPC endpoint that doesn't need to go through the internet. So this will allow data to be moved, kind of accessed quickly across environment. Okay, so with that, I'll pass on to the next speaker.
Raj, over to you. Are you okay talking about the clinical chemistry?
Sure. Okay.
I can dive in if necessary.
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Raj, and I'm from the Genome Institute of Singapore, and I also co-lead the SCHS with Ko Woon-Pui. So in this work package, we are looking at improving the phenotypes of the cohort participants. So there are two aspects, clinical chemistry as well as genomic genotyping. So over here, what we are trying to do is that we are, a lot of these cohorts that we have, they are imbalanced in the type of clinical chemistries that we have. So what we want to try and eventually get done is have a standard assays for the glucose panel, for the liver panel, kidney, and inflammation, right? So we're trying to get all those things done across the different cohorts. And the team at NTU LKC. So they have basically built up the infrastructure to do this at scale. So this is what these slides are supposed to show. And what we have also tested over here is that there are some concerns that because these cohorts, the serum and plasma is actually stored from several years back. So we wanted to test and make sure that the assays that we are doing are stable. So across almost all these assays, the liver panel, the CRP, bilirubin, cholesterol levels, triglycerides, they all seem very, very highly correlated between the serum that was stored for 4 years as well as stored for 1 year, right? So those are the correlations that these plots are showing. And yes, the other bit is on the genotyping. So again, the different cohorts have different levels of genotyping. So the SG100K, for example, has whole genome sequencing data. The other cohorts, like our SCHS, has a GWAS genotyping, and other cohorts, the Yishun cohort, hasn't been genotyped. So what we are trying to do is, again, trying to harmonize the genotype data, and we try to improve the genomic coverage that we get, especially for the GWAS datasets as well. So one method is to impute using reference panels, and especially if those reference panels are ancestry matched to our local cohort, it's been shown to improve your genomic coverage. And we are working with the SG100K team in Max and the team at GIS to actually develop these newer imputation reference panels, and we can then now apply these reference panels across the different cohorts that we have. And at the same time, the genotyping costs are also coming down. So we can get the sequencing done for, depends, roughly about $100, $200 hopefully by the end of next year. So if those costs continue to go down for the cohorts that actually don't have the genotyping, we can also extend this sequencing sort of strategy for those cohorts as well, and basically bring all this data together. So I think that's the last slide, and I will pass over to Ching Yu.
Thank you for having me here. So, one of the research use case in the SSCC is the research, the image analysis. And the use case we are going to demonstrate here is the data images, right? Two of the cohorts in SSCC, SLAS and HU100K have the data images. So the aim here is to use the data image to predict the metabolic and CVD outcome. And we know that now we cannot actually for any data analysis, right, we have to use the AI tools, right? Because AI now is powerful, and we have to use AI to fully harness the information in our data, in our images. Myself, I'm a clinician and original epidemiologist, right? But now actually 60 or 70% of my research work is using the AI-based approach. So for example, here what we are going to do is that to build up a data image foundation model. As mentioned in Andrew's talk, that basically 2 years ago, the PSkin in Moorfield, right, they built up the first medical image-based foundation models. And this approach, foundation model, has changed the way we process data and the way we do data analysis. So here we are also going to build a foundation model. Basically, in the foundation model, in a pre-training stage, we don't need any data labeling. But after we do the pre-training, we can use the smaller amount of data set with labels data, right? For example, in this case, we can only use maybe a few hundred data image with labeled information. Then we can do a fine-tune process. Then we can train this model for different downstream tasks. So what we are going to do here is that after the fine tune, we can do, the correlation with data image with the other research measures parameter such as lipid, HbA1c, blood pressure, and so on. And in the downstream test tool, actually, we can use our data image to predict the incident event of CVD, CKD, and so on in the trust platforms. And not only the data foundation model, actually, we already have the founders image foundation model, and by using some other technique like this contrastive learning, we can put the different embedding in the same space. So, by using this approach, we can build up this so-called multi-modality biomarkers prediction models. So this is just something I want to share with you today. I know that the newer second batch of cohort, some of you also have the data images, right? Like the pioneer study and maybe other cohort. So I believe we can all work together, to really make use the image data across Singapore.
Okay, that brings us to the end. What do we want to try and communicate? As the first funded collaborative effort, at some level we've been, sort of the tip of the spear solving problems, finding our way, working out what the anxieties are, but also working out what the opportunities are from working together like this. And one of the obvious anxieties you get when you bring 4 separate cohorts together is, hang on, am I going to be losing control of my data? Does this mean I'm going to be consumed and made irrelevant by this bigger juggernaut that exists? And let me reassure, that's not how it works. Okay, it's a collaboration, it's a partnership. Okay, and if we think, for example, about our data access committee, we bring our data into one place, but then each of the data custodians, the data owners, they've got the right to decide what research happens within their data set. So you're not losing control of anything. That's the negative side. It's not a negative to be overly anxious about. Okay. On the positive side, what does being part of this consortium bring? Well, it brings solutions to shared problems. It brings uplift in terms of the quality and interoperability of your data through harmonization and integration. It brings opportunities of scale. Now you don't just have access to your own data set, but you have access to the data of the consortium. You have access to the expertise of consortium partners. Ching Yu, a global expert in application of AI to images. Max, a global expert on advanced data platforms. It brings you the opportunity to collaborate and partner with people who know how to solve difficult things. As we've shown, it also brings opportunities to enhance the data set through running core analyses across sample sets or running additional genomic analyses. So in every way, uplifting your data set, uplifting your team in terms of skills that you've got, and uplifting your opportunities in terms of what other resources and other platforms you've got access to. So although there have been times over the last 2 years when I've cursed and sworn and said, God, this is hard work, getting everything together into one collaborative effort, at the end of the day, having put in that effort and, as Andrew said this morning, climbed the last bit of the mountain, the view is better. The view is better, we get to see further, and importantly, you're accompanied by a wider set of team, a wider group of people who are also motivated with a shared vision to solve important problems. So it's a journey that's been worthwhile. Are we finished? No, we're not at all. And I guess we may end up talking to you again in a year or two's time. The kind of big problems we've still got to solve. We've got to solve our research collaboration agreement. We've got to finish our harmonization. We've got to get our linkage to trust data sorted out, we've got to get our TRE functional, and we've got to finish our enhancements and our data demonstration. But these are all things that, if you asked me 2 years ago, they were remote and potentially some of them impossible, but now they're within our grasp. And so if you're part of a cohort that's, a second wave cohort, thinking about, your position within NCO phase 2, we hope that we've got things that you can learn from or take advantage of, our core clinical chemistry lab, for example. And I assure you that we, as NCO phase 1, are open-armed in terms of wanting to extend what we have learned and the capability we've developed to the rest of to a wider set of the Singapore ecosystem. Thank you for your attention. We'll be pleased to take any questions. Okay. Shirley.
No questions? I'm sure the questions will come later on. We are also this is the biomedical data sets, but I'm also aware that there are people here who are more social sciences, like Jean and Rahul and, the others who are working on that dimension. So we just want to say that we are aware that there are different data types that should be brought together, and how do we help facilitate some of the linkages if need be. So we are also working and talking to social sciences people just to make sure that when you look at a person, you look at the whole of the person and not sort of just the biological aspects, the social aspects and things like that are important, especially with healthy aging programs that will come by in the next 5 years. If there's no more questions, we shouldn't keep you. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoy lunch. I hope this was something useful to learn in your journey for data sets and cohorts. And then we'll see you at other NCO events in the near future. Thank you.